The Man Who Grew Too Much is the 13th episode of the 25th season of The Simpsons, directed by Matthew Schofield. And I just want to point out, if you're watching this season on Disney Plus in the UK, it's the wrong way round with episode 12, Diggs. Disney Plus have uploaded them the wrong way around, so that's just worth something bearing in mind. The ending to this episode has left me a little confused with how I feel about it, but I'll talk about that with a spoiler warning in a moment. This episode focuses on the return of Sideshow Bob, and I have to say it feels a little too soon. It feels like, because he was in an episode not that long ago, it feels just like they're bringing the character back too frequently. And that kind of overshadows the shock factor of when he returns. That being said, I did actually enjoy this episode. Sideshow Bob and Lisa spend a lot of time together as they're making some genetically altered foods, and it's quite nice to see those interacting with each other, and there's a nice trip to a museum that I really liked, and I had a lot of fun seeing them bonding and getting along, and obviously nothing is as it seems, which is always the case with Sideshow Bob, but I won't say any more than that. And I think the character was pretty great in this one. What he's done to himself, very fascinating, and ultimately what happened with the character in this episode, I enjoyed. I think everything worked the way it should. The last few Sideshow Bob episodes have been really great. To begin with, despite my love of Kelsey Grammer, the first few Sideshow Bob episodes I just didn't care for, but as it's gone on, I've cared more and more for the episodes and for the character. So even though I feel like it was too soon, I was still really enjoying that part of the episode. We also have a subplot that I think's really boring, and it involves Marge teaching a class at the church about abstinence, teaching this class to teenagers, and honestly, it was so dull. The finger puppets made it a little bit more interesting, but honestly, I just did not care about that part of the narrative. But thankfully, the Sideshow Bob aspect was so fun that ultimately I liked this episode. Definitely a really enjoyable one. So, I need to discuss the final scene. And on the one hand, I love it, but on the other hand, I don't. So this is a massive spoiler for something that happens at the end. If anything I say doesn't make sense, please remember that I haven't seen Diggs yet, which is the episode that technically comes before this one. But from what I've Googled, that shouldn't matter. So at the very end of this episode, we see Ned, and he's sitting in his chair, and on the table there's a portrait of Maud, and there's a portrait of Edna. And I got a little bit emotional because I didn't realise that it had been quite so long since Marcia Wallace passed away. And this is the last Krabappel episode, and I did think, I kind of thought, hang on, have I missed something? When did they kill her off? I thought they actually killed her off in the show. Maybe from, an illness or something. I had no idea. I'd intentionally not, Googled it or anything. But then all of a sudden it just came out of nowhere, and I have Googled it, and as far as I know, the show never gives a reason. They never address what happened to this character, although I think apparently they do at one point, but in a way that's kind of not canon. So part of me thinks, actually, by not making a big deal out of it, by doing it more subtly, it's almost more respectful. But at the same time, if you're a casual fan of The Simpsons and you don't know who Marcia Wallace is, you don't know she passed away, you don't understand why they would write out that character, that's going to make no sense. Now, is that fair? Should the show create content that's aimed purely at the diehard fans, or anybody who's aware of the actors, the voice actors, and their lives? Or should they make content that people who are just casual viewers also be able to follow? I don't necessarily have an answer to that, but I did think, in terms of the TV show, it wasn't a good way to present that information. But in terms of being respectful and subtle, and almost by being subtle and just doing that little nod, it was more emotional. And in a way, it kind of said, we don't need to make a big song and dance out of this because everybody already knows. And of course, not everybody does, because there are a lot of people who are just casual fans of The Simpsons who tune in and out as and when, and they might not know anything about the voice actors, which is absolutely fine. And I feel like in terms of the handling of the character from that perspective, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And if you don't know why the character was killed off, or, well, I guess written out, really, it's going to be very confusing. Yeah, people can Google it, but I was confused, and I knew it was coming. So if I didn't know it was coming, I'd be very, very, very confused, to the point where I genuinely thought, have I missed something? And then I realised I'd missed an entire episode, but apparently that's irrelevant. So I don't know, I feel like on the one hand, the subtlety was moving, but in terms of handling of the character, I don't know. I'll see how I feel going forward as we get in with the episodes and what it's like to have this absence of Krabappel. And I believe Bart gets a new teacher. I'm not 100% sure about that. I've kind of tried to avoid spoilers as much as possible because, well, I was keen to see what would happen with his character, but I didn't want to know, if that makes sense. I wanted to find out as it happened, and I'm just baffled. I'm baffled that it's not what I was expecting. I was genuinely expecting, a full episode, an emotional episode, and in a way, it works without that, but it still feels a bit strange. I don't know. If you have any strong thoughts either way, please feel free to let me know. I'm going to try and move on now, or move backwards as I go and watch the previous episode. Thanks a lot, Disney Plus. The Man Who Grew Too Much is a good episode.